How do pawn breaks affect pawn structure? Have you ever wondered how a simple pawn move can change the entire game of chess? Today, we will discuss how initiating pawn breaks can significantly impact pawn structure and overall strategy. Pawn breaks are strategic moves where you advance a pawn to challenge your opponent's formation. This action can disrupt their setup and create new opportunities for you. When you initiate a pawn break, you aim to attack or undermine your opponent's pawns. This can lead to exchanges or even create weaknesses in their structure. For instance, if you push a pawn forward, it can open lines that were previously blocked. This allows your pieces to move more freely and increases your chances of launching an attack. One of the main effects of a pawn break is disrupting your opponent's pawn chains. A well-timed break can shatter their chain, leading to isolated or backward pawns. These pawns become easy targets, weakening their control over important squares and limiting their piece activity. Moreover, pawn breaks can create open lines for your pieces. When you break through your opponent's pawn shield, you open files for rooks and diagonals for bishops and queens. This is especially important in the middle game, as it enhances your piece's effectiveness and attacking potential. Another key aspect is that pawn breaks can force your opponent to make concessions. They might leave pawns undefended or create holes that cannot be protected by other pawns. These weaknesses can be exploited tactically, giving you an advantage in the game. Additionally, initiating a pawn break can change the nature of the position on the board. A closed or locked position can transform into a more open one, shifting the strategic demands of the game. This can benefit players who thrive in open positions or enjoy tactical play. By advancing a pawn to challenge your opponent's structure, you can gain more space on the board and often seize the initiative. This forces your opponent to respond defensively, allowing you to dictate the flow of the game. For example, central pawn breaks like pushing a pawn from d4 to d5 or e4 to e5 challenge central control and open the center. Flank pawn breaks, such as c4 to c5 or f4 to f5, aim to undermine the opponent's structure on the wings, creating weaknesses or open lines for attacks. Timing and preparation are essential for effective pawn breaks. You need to support the breaking pawn with your pieces and anticipate your opponent's responses. Sometimes, sacrificing a pawn in a break can be justified if it leads to greater activity or positional advantages. In practical play, pawn breaks serve multiple purposes. They can open lines for an attack, remove a weak pawn of your own, or force your opponent into making commitments that reveal their plans. They can also create squares for your pieces that were previously inaccessible and destabilize a strong pawn structure to gain space or initiative. In summary, initiating pawn breaks is a fundamental strategy in chess that directly affects pawn structure. By opening lines, creating weaknesses, and shifting the balance of space and control, you can transform static positions into dynamic ones. Mastering this technique is essential for both attacking and positional play.